Good evening, Mercy Rodriguez here, week 7 for MPA 560. This week we are doing a qualitative research design assessment, and my program is the Calhome Grant Program. So this week we were asked a number of different questions for the assessment. One was the possible aspects to measure that we would use using a qualitative design. So I thought of two. One would be barriers to home ownership, and then two, effectiveness of the assistant types. With the barriers to home ownership, what are the non-financial obstacles to home ownership? For example, credit access, knowledge gaps, or discrimination possibly. And then maybe how these barriers differ across demographic groups. Um, I would also do effectiveness of assistant type. So what type of assistance felt the most helpful or accessible to the participants? And maybe if there are any preferences or suggestions for improving the programs. Next, we were asked to identify two qualitative designs that might work for our expanded research. Mine is a qualitative, two, phenomenological design and a case study. With the phenomenological design, my purpose would be to explore the lived experience of individuals who've received housing assistance and maybe transitioned to home ownership. So basically, I'm interested in how people experience the housing assistance programs, and this would help me capture social and emotional and psychological aspects that the quantitative data would not be able to do. Um, we would use it to conduct interviews, in-depth interviews with individuals, maybe those who use different types of assistance, and maybe I can explore something like, what did home ownership mean to you? What barriers did you have to overcome? Um, and then with the case study design, I would be able to conduct in-depth examination of a specific program or community that received the funding in the housing. Um, I would be using, and working with a real world program in a randomized setting. So it's a quasi-experimental. I would use it to, um, I would use it to select a few cities or organizations with different types of levels or assistance, and I would collect interviews and documents and observe, and I would compare how different contexts influence the home ownership rates. And my qualitative research question would be, how do individuals who receive the different types of housing assistance perceive their journey towards home ownership? This question would help me focus on like their personal experiences and, how they perceived it. And I think this is key for qualitative research. It would let me explore the differences between the types of assistance. So, for an example, like maybe grants versus loans. And it would also connect me to quantitative variables, maybe like assistance, the type of assistance, and the funding level. Next, we were asked to identify how we might collect the data or like our method. I decided I would do in-depth structured interviews, semi-structured interviews. So allow participants to basically share their stories and see while we still have like some kind of structure to keep the conversation focused on the research, it would be in their own words. So it would give me flexibility to explore anything unexpected, but also, get really great valuable insight that may come up during the conversation. And it would be perfect for exploring any kind of personal perceptions or individual impact of all the different programs. And I would do this by developing an interview guide. I would recruit participants and then conduct the interviews and record them. Next, we were asked one reliability or validity concern you might have for your study, whether it's quantitative or qualitative study. So mine is quantitative. My concern would be a quantitative concern, a validity concern, an internal validity. And because it is a quasi-experimental design, it's not a random assignment. So it would be harder to say whether funding or assistance type cause changes in home ownership rates. But other factors would be like local housing markets, demographic shifts that might explain the differences. And I would address this by using control variables, maybe income region, race, or credit. And I would also consider propensity scoring matching to balance the groups like statistically. Then we were asked to watch the IRB video and bring back two takeaways. Overall, this IRB stands for the Institutional Review Boards, and it's a committee that reviews research studies to make sure that they follow the ethical standards and regulations for research with people. The whole thing was fascinating to me. Some research institutions, they can use commercial IRBs or research institutions to review their studies. And one of the two things I found interesting was that the IRB staff has to consist of five and all with different backgrounds, with at least one of them who cannot be a scientist and they cannot be connected to who's doing the research. And the second thing was that the IRBs check that the participants will be protected. So they go through and make sure that using their ethical standards and the regulatory requirements, that the participants are protected. That is my presentation and my conclusion. Thank you so much. I hope you have a good evening.